Time now for Back Pages tonight here on Sky Sports News, bringing you a first look at the sports stories in the morning's newspapers. Joining us on the show, the Mirror's chief football writer John Cross and football reporter for The Times, Charlotte Dunker. Welcome to you both. Let's quickly run through the back pages as they reach us following all the football in Europe and the League Cup. The Guardian leads with that image of a frustrated Erling Haaland, perhaps reflects the game. Haaland made to wait for his 100th City goal. As they have the story, they can't get away scot-free. EFL wants to charge Leicester with PSR breach if they're relegated. Plus, they've got the Tottenham story. Spurs saved Spence and Johnson strike late to void Coventry upset. Times back page, interesting leads, covers the rugby union story. Maro Itoje saying that Eddie Jones was wrong about me. And above that, so they highlight Brennan Johnson scoring that winning goal. Spares Spurs blushes is how they put it. Inside pages of the Telegraph sports section focus on the injury blow for Arsenal. In the build-up to the Atlanta game, Odegaard out with quote-unquote significant ankle injury, admits Arteta. And a line from Manchester United, who polled 500 fans over the new stadium plans. Well, let's start with Manchester City 0-0 against Inter Milan at home. Haaland pictured there in The Guardian. We can see it one more time. Charlotte, I guess it typifies the mood around this game, doesn't it? He looks bored and frustrated, made to wait for his 100th City goal, they say. Repeat of the final from 15 months ago. Was this a little bit underwhelming?
I think the problem we've got with Manchester City is that we all expect them to go into these games and just swipe people away. And I think credit to Inter, because they came into this game with a very defined game plan. They wanted to sit tight with their back five. They frustrated Manchester City. They couldn't find a way to break them down. And they had two very physical men up front who they tried to hit them with on the counter-attack. And to be fair, they very nearly did. I think they can probably come away and be frustrated possibly that they didn't get anything out of this game. I think City looked a bit off colour, a bit like the kit that they had on, but maybe the less said about that, the better. And I think this is the first time that they failed to score a goal in the group stage game at home. So it is being billed as a big shock, but it's Manchester City in the Champions League. There's 7 more group stage games in this new format. I'll be very surprised if we're sat here in January talking about this game being a crisis.
Indeed. Well, you mentioned the volume of games, John. Back page of The Sun as well. Haaland's not on it is their headline. Is that the problem, though? We've got the English champions against the Italian champions, but it doesn't really matter that much, does it, the result?
Not really, Teddy. It's a good point. I mean, it's the launch of the new Champions League format. It's the brave new world, isn't it? And it's supposed to be all singing, all dancing this week. And yet, what do? We probably turn over and watch the Carabao Cup if we can. To be honest, I mean, honestly, that's the problem, isn't it? Because there's a lot of games there to kind of reach where you need to finish in the top seeds in the league format. You've got those 2 extra games, which has then caused this massive row a week about the extra demands and sort of pressures on players. And then we set it up with Man City, year on, year out. They're basically billed as Champions League favourites because they're this fantastic football team that do play spectacular football, and basically Erling Haaland scores an absolute ton of goals each week. And then what do? We kick off with a 0-0 draw. And so it's almost a bit of a tough sell, really. I do think for UEFA in the Champions League a little bit. I think it's going to take a bit of time to get used to. One of the things that I think is that basically, what do we love about football? I think we love its simplicity. And I think it's going to take us a while to kind of get our heads around and just know automatically what happens in this Champions League. Who goes through, what's a good result, what's a bad result. And at the moment, it just feels like we're lacking that excitement, jeopardy, call it what you like. But we've ended up with a 0-0 in really what was supposed to be the big advert for the new competition on the Wednesday night.
Indeed, interesting. A lot of the back page is dominated by the Carabao Cup, as John says. But let's go inside the Telegraph and look more at the City story. And it centres on injuries, interestingly. To keep Haaland waiting as City sweat on the Bruyne injury. Jason Burt, chief football correspondent at the Etihad. And I suppose to John Point, Charlotte, will City be more concerned about De Bruyne's possible absence from the Premier League than the Champions League? Will they see progression here more comfortable than perhaps what they've got domestically on their cards?
Yeah, because obviously they've got that massive game this weekend at home against Arsenal. I'm sure we'll touch on their own injury problems that they've got. But De Bruyne there pictured. I think he came off at half-time. He seemed to have tweaked something. So we know the sort of machine they can be in the Premier League, but going up against the team who are tipped to take them all the way this season in the league, you'd think having one of their best players in Kevin De Bruyne fit is going to be a big concern for Guardiola. Obviously, we've not heard anything from his press conference yet to suggest how serious or not that injury is. But in terms of the Champions League, I think UEFA wanted it to be more exciting in terms of there would be no dead rubbers going forward. I was at the Villa game last night, and when they scored their third goal, they were chanting top of the league, because obviously now they're not, because we know how many Bayern scored and Celtic scored 5 today. So I think it could be more interesting the further along the competition we get. But at the minute, as you say, they've got 7 more games. So not winning tonight isn't a total disaster for them, but losing Kevin De Bruyne this weekend could be a bigger blow for them.
Interesting, Charlotte, you thought the kit was a disaster for Manchester City. I've just twigged it was the definitely maybe tribute, wasn't it? City see victory slide away is the Mirror headline. Pep's team are far from supersonic in Oasis kit. That was a good song, maybe not a great night of football. John, what about De Bruyne? Will they miss him? How significant? Because it was OK in the end last season when he missed a big chunk, wasn't it?
Yeah, blimey! I'll tell you what. The guy that's written that headline took the mickey out of me for weeks afterwards for getting online and getting some Oasis tickets. So I'm actually going to have them after this show. But honestly, yeah, I do think it's a massive blow for City potentially for De Bruyne, because, you know, I mean, listen, we say that, and he's obviously missed chunks of recent seasons, and City always find a way. As I say, the signing in the summer of Gundogan, bringing him back on a free, was just an absolute masterstroke. But you can't deny the quality of De Bruyne, and it is in these games that sometimes you just sort of kind of suffer these kind of freak setbacks. I mean, it's just amazing, isn't it, for City that they basically scored 11 goals in their opening 4 Premier League games, 9 of which have come from Erling Haaland, who scored more than any other individual team in the Premier League. I mean, it just blows your mind. And yet they draw a blank tonight. And, you know, a lot of people sort of kind of really sort of saying in the match reports, you know, Jack Grealish was the sort of the standout star and Inter could have nicked it. So, you know, it's just so difficult, I think, sometimes to kind of keep that momentum. And I wonder also whether City tonight also had half an eye on that game, because if you know that it's not kind of win or bust in the Champions League, are you going to be at sort of kind of 100% intensity if you know that you've got such a big game at the weekend? All these kind of factors come into it, really. But I must say, I did expect City to win, and I think if City had won, then kind of that gives you a boost. But I do think they probably finish it cursing more, as Charlotte rightly says, more about De Bruyne's potential absence than anything else.
Yeah, indeed. We'll keep across those injury news as well ahead of that huge match against Arsenal on Sunday. We'll talk about Martin Odegaard and Arsenal in due course. Martin Odegaard, of course, thinking of Mikel Arteta. Let's go to Celtic and consider their achievement tonight, Charlotte. 'Cause it's not a small one, is it? For the first time ever, they've won the first game of a Champions League group game, or group stage game in terms of the new league. Hit 5 in flying start to campaign in the Telegraph Sport, alongside a picture of De Bruyne. And not maybe the sternest opposition, Charlotte, but how significant for Celtic?
Yeah, I think, as I was mentioning before, if you can see in the bottom corner, that's the league table as we now know it in the Champions League. And because we're not in this 4-team format anymore, I think if any team that can go and put 5 past them, they've got a higher chance of finishing in the top 8. If you finish in the top 8, you then don't have to have those extra qualification games in the new year, which all these teams will be desperate to avoid. So I think for a team like Celtic to obviously have a +4 goal difference after the first game, that I think they're second in the table now behind Bayern. So I think the amount of goals that these teams can go on and score. I think yesterday against Aston Villa, for example, against Young Boys, I think there was the appetite to go and score more rather than just thinking we'll see it out because we've got the 3 points. The goal difference in this new league could end up being really, really important. So what a brilliant night for Celtic to score 5.
And only 8 go out at this stage, which you think, surely there's hope for Celtic and Brendan Rodgers this season to get through to the next phase. John, let's consider the Carabao Cup, though. Back page of your paper, The Mirror, just at the top there. You've gone very much with Manchester City. Here's a lead story with the Oasis reference we've mentioned, but Spurs leave it late to stun Coventry. How big a result is that in the East Midlands tonight for Tottenham and for Ange Postecoglou?
Particularly for Postecoglou, Telly, I really think that if Spurs had gone out at Coventry, it really would have ramped up the pressure on Postecoglou. I mean, it's not been a great start for Spurs by any means. 4 points from their opening 4 games in the Premier League. They went out at this stage last season in the Carabao Cup. Postecoglou has kind of spent the week talking about his remarkable, success rate in his second season, and then kind of almost having to clarify. I don't know whether that's to put more pressure on himself or ease the pressure on himself. But I tell you what, I do think that Spurs fans who loved him last season and loved the style of football, he gave them a wonderful start. They tailed off badly. I do think it's testing times, because the biggest thing about that was that energy, that positive energy that the fans had. They really appreciated Postecoglou. They, love singing the songs. And at the moment, it just feels quite flat. They're 3 minutes away from going out at Coventry, which would have been a devastating result. I don't think that he would have immediately been sacked or anything like that. But I tell you what, they've got Brentford at home on Saturday. And again, if they'd sort of kind of had that upset and it feels like you're going game to game a little bit. It was 2 unlikely heroes that kind of pulled the result out of the bag. DJ Spence, who basically just hasn't had really much of a look in since he joined the club, and Brennan Johnson, who's frankly cost a lot of money, about 45 million quid, and basically, it hasn't really taken off for him really. So 2 unlikely sort of kind of saviours for Spurs on the night. And I tell you what, I think these are big times for Postecoglou, and I think the barometer is more about finishing the Champions League places this season. That's what people expect, than actually delivering a trophy.
What's your read on it, Charlotte? Inside the Telegraph, we've got Graham Hill reporting from the Coventry Building Society Arena. Johnson spares Postecoglou's blushes. Brennan Johnson makes the headline, but it is Jed Spence celebrating that equaliser who's pictured. Do you feel that Postecoglou has perhaps brought the pressure on him, or is it refreshing to hear managers saying that they are going to secure a trophy?
I think the way that he talked himself up, you can understand it, because as he said, he was speaking in facts. In all the other jobs, all the other positions he's been in, he has won a trophy in his second season, but Tottenham haven't won a trophy for a long time. So it was very brazen of him to come out and basically say, that is what I'm going to deliver. So when they were 1-0 down in the 87th minute, you thought those comments were going to come back immediately to bite him, because that would be one less opportunity that they've got to lift silverware this season. But I think the bigger problems for him at the minute are to change this mood around the team. We've not seen them hitting the heights that we saw when he first arrived. So I think maybe talks of trophies are a little bit premature. And like John said, they need to be focusing on aiming to finish 4th this season, because that would be a massive achievement for them. So I think they just need to get back to winning ways properly. They did definitely get out of jail tonight. I thought Coventry by far the better team, and they needed to go to the bench. I'm not sure he got his starting 11 right, Postecoglou. So there's question marks around him. Like John said, I'm not on board with people saying maybe he should be getting sacked. I think that's a step too far, but it's going to be a testing few weeks for him if they can't get back to winning ways and in style, really.
Absolutely, as John says as well, significant game at the weekend against Brentford. We'll see how it develops at Tottenham. Charlotte and John, thank you very much for now. We will take a quick break. When we come back, we'll discuss more of the back pages as well, including this in the Telegraph. Mentioned it there, De Bruyne possibly injured for City, but what about Odegaard? Significant ankle injury, admits Arteta. We'll discuss that in a few minutes. Welcome back. You are watching Back Pages tonight, and it's welcome back to the Mirror's chief football writer, John Cross, and football reporter for The Times, Charlotte Dunker. Let's go back to the Telegraph then. We talked about De Bruyne's possible injury for Manchester City, definite injury for Martin Odegaard. John, you're out there in Bergamo. Odegaard out with quote-unquote significant ankle injury, admits Arteta. He was a little bit cryptic, wasn't he, on the exact time? How long do you think Arsenal fans should fear their captain will be out for?
Yeah, Arteta was sort of saying that hopefully it's weeks more than months. But it's been a really strange injury, this one, because obviously he did it while on international duty for Norway against Austria. The initial fear from Norway was that he'll be out maybe until the next international break. Arsenal got him back in the country and thought it was a minor sprain, really, and hopefully no ligament damage. He's undergone further tests, further MRI scan, seen a specialist then this week. And now sort of kind of the final verdict comes out that basically it was a significant, as Arteta put it, injury, and he will miss a period of time. Look, I do think it'll probably be weeks rather than kind of a long layoff post Christmas, for example. But it's a massive blow for Arsenal ahead of not just at Atalanta tomorrow night, but the Man City crunch, but then also just the title campaign generally. Odegaard is such a good player. He's come on so well. He's such an inspiring leader. I think he's a massive character around the club. They'll miss him on and off the pitch, I think, as a leader. So it's a huge blow, I think, for Arsenal's title ambitions. There's no obvious direct replacement either. I think they have to find a slightly different way of playing, and I think to replace the sort of kind of the quality of Odegaard is going to be a massive ask in the coming weeks ahead for Arteta.
Indeed, the back page of the Express says odd man out just at the top there. Skipper faces lengthy spell on sidelines above the picture of De Bruyne, and it's a pain for City. Charlotte, how big a miss will this be, particularly on Sunday? How does it change the approach? We saw a relatively conservative approach in the North London derby. Do you think that's going to be something similar now, forced upon Arteta?
Yeah, although I'm not sure that would necessarily be forced upon him if we cast our minds back to this fixture last season. I think we all billed it as what we hoped was going to be the best game of the season, and they both just sort of cancelled each other out, didn't they? So it would be interesting to see maybe if Arteta was planning to be more proactive this season, and now he's going to have to revert to the system that we saw him play last season in that draw. But he's a massive blow for Arsenal. I think Arteta said it himself. He said he's the identity of how they play, and they're going to have to work hard to try and make sure they get results without him. I think they obviously won in the North London derby without him and without Declan Rice. Declan Rice, I think, is expected to start in that Champions League game tomorrow and will be back for Manchester City at the weekend. So that will be a boost for them. But I think if Arsenal, as we all expect them to, in terms of taking Manchester City right to the end, if they want to show that progression, then they've got to be showing that they're a squad that are capable of overcoming massive setbacks like losing key players such as Odegaard. And I think over the last few seasons, that's how we've seen them improve in terms of how they develop and get over these setbacks. So it's going to be interesting to see not only how they deal without him on Sunday, because I think in some ways that game, they seem to come up with their own tactical plan for that regardless because of the stature of the game. But I think going forward, it's going to be interesting to see how they do decide to adapt without him.
Mikel's Martfear, the back page headline on The Sun, John. On that note, and Charlotte references the game last season, Arsenal ended up missing out on the title. Do you think there's an argument that perhaps they need to really go for it on Sunday? Could Declan Rice come in and fulfil that pressing role that Odegaard does so well?
Well, it was so interesting, wasn't it? At sort of kind of the end of the season, in kind of the analysis, it was Rodri that actually pointed to that game being almost a turning point. And he sort of suggested that Arsenal's kind of fear or failure to really go for the victory cost them ultimately in the title race. It was an incredibly tight margin by the end. And then, Arsenal, if they'd won that game, would they have gone on to be champions? Would they have taken extra confidence and belief, quite apart from the points as well? And so there's a strong case for that. And, City have made a reputation under Guardiola for never going out sort of kind of defensive first. They always go to win games. And I do think, I think that will almost be the narrative and be the story and the build up to this game, really. Will Arsenal actually go for it this year? Because, look, I think they were strong defensively last season at the Etihad, but I just think they tried to play it on the break, keep it tight, and then if they could get a goal and a win, then that would be a bonus. And maybe they just sort of kind of just feel as if they sort of kind of have to sort of kind of come out their shells a bit more. But I think it's so early in the season. It wouldn't surprise me if Arteta was just kind of a bit more cautious and played the pragmatist role again, really, to be honest.
Interested to see. Brilliant game live on Super Sunday on Sky Sports. Let's go to the Telegraph. Charlotte, England players could strike, warns the PFA chief Maheta Malango. Charlotte, how prevalent of a problem is this for players across the border? It's always Rodri being referenced and Jude Bellingham being referenced. Is this a problem for the world's best player? How unified do you think the game is on this?
Yeah, I think if they're going to strike, then it's got to be an agreement across the board that they're going to do it. You can't just have one team with half the players agreeing to go on strike. It's going to have to be something that is unified. But I think when you speak to players at any team across any level, I think they talk about the hectic fixture schedule, how there's no rest, how they're going from one competition to another, how that's affecting them, the fatigue, all that sort of stuff. So, and we just hear about more and more competitions, the expansion of the Champions League. There's going to be more games in that. We've got the Club World Cup coming up. When are they going to get the rest? Is that going to damage the product that we also enjoy watching? That sort of thing. So, but I do think that this threat of strike, is it going to be effective if they don't do it? I'm not sure how close we are to that.
No, indeed. John McGinn's been talking about the mental health aspect of it as well, the toll of playing too many games. Wanted to finish quickly, John, with your thoughts on the passing of Totò Schillaci, covered by Jim White in The Telegraph. Schillaci, the wide-eyed Sicilian who lit up Italia 90, dies at age 59. For those of us who remember the tournament, just remind us of how special it was and how special he was in that wonderful summer.
By the way, what a lovely piece. Absolutely fantastic read. And the headline says it all, because he was that passionate face of that World Cup. He was just a sensation in that tournament. He wasn't really an absolute superstar before or after. He just came and basically realised everyone's dream. You know, as thinking that piece, it kind of describes him as the passionate Sicilian who just rose to the occasion, and basically his eyes bulging and so exciting, was scoring these amazing goals and basically just lit up sort of Italia 90. Italia 90, I think, was a turning point for football. It kind of went away from the horrible times and some horrible times of hooliganism in the 80s into a brave new world, exciting football into the 90s. And I just thought Schillaci was such a part of that. He was the superstar, the world superstar of that tournament. We love Gazza, of course, in this country, but it was Schillaci's tournament, Schillaci's highlights, and he brought a whole nation. They were host Italy, of course, together, and it was just what a wonderful fairy tale for Schillaci and for Italy. So sad to see him passing, but what a wonderful life and career he had.
Absolutely. I remember watching as a little boy, and as you say, iconic images from Italia 90 associated with Paul Gascoigne and Gary Lineker and all the stars of that wonderful tournament. Charlotte and John, thank you very much for your time on Back Pages tonight. Hope to see you again very soon.